They left me with a tray of frozen casseroles and a pink sticky note that said, "Love you, Mame currency I die Arisis. As if warmth could be written in ink. The lasagna was cold in the middle, burnt on the edges. I ate it alone by the front window, watching the snow pile itself like forgotten mail on the hedge outside. The house hummed softly, the same house I once filled with birthday parties, scraped knees, and cocoa steam curling above chipped mugs. Now, its walls felt wider, colder, quieter. Mark had zipped up his parka and avoided my eyes when he said it. It's just a small cabin, no heating, you understand. I nodded. What else could I do? They'd gone up to Echo Lake, supposedly. Said it wasn't safe for someone my age. Funny, I remember 2 winters in a trailer when Mark was little. No insulation. Just blankets and love. He never got sick. I never complained. On the 3rd day, the silence pressed too tight, so I cleaned, scrubbed grout with a toothbrush, polished cabinet handles, emptied drawers of manuals I couldn't read without glasses. It wasn't cleaning, it was erasing. Then I opened Zoe's social media. There she was, all sunshine and laughter, holding a pineapple drink with a tiny pink umbrella. Hawaii is heaven. The caption chirped, behind her palm trees. Ocean, a beach chair with Liana's sun hat draped casually over the back. Cabin life is rough. Paradise found. One post read. My stomach clenched. I tapped again, and again. Each click brought another photo. Spa robes, coconut drinks, ocean views. Then I saw it, a receipt. Mark's email on the booking confirmation. Charges on my credit card. Not the joint one, not the emergency one. Mine. Every hotel stay, every cocktail, every lie. All drawn from the trust I gave. I stood in my kitchen, holding my phone like it might scream the truth for me, but it didn't. It just glowed, indifferent. He promised it was for emergencies, just in case. Mom, he said, if something ever happens. Something did. He happened. I didn't call him. I didn't cry. I called the bank. No, not fraud, I said. Just unauthorized. They froze the account. I canceled the card. Then I unlocked the box under my bed, the one with our old documents. Yellowed and quiet. I flipped to the page. Power of attorney. His signature. My trust. Rick, my banker, picked up on the second ring. Rick, I said, I need to remove my son's access. He paused. We'll get your name back where it belongs, Mrs. Hartwood. I didn't even realize I'd been holding my breath. It was never about the money. It was about knowing that I handed them warmth and they traded it for sun hats and spa days. They thought I'd sit quietly, that the cold would convince me to forget. But I remember. I remember every scraped knee I kissed better, every lunch I packed, every sleepless night I counted his fevered breaths. And I remember now. I am not too old. I am not too fragile. I am not too late. When they come home, the accounts will be closed. A lawyer will be waiting, and I'll be out, a coat zipped, steps sure, walking into the cold. Not Hawaii, but it's honest, and it's mine. It started with the thermostat, a small, domestic nothing. One of those moments you wouldn't even notice unless you'd spent a lifetime holding the weight of things unspoken. It was December 26th, the morning after Christmas, if you could still call it that, when half the family had left by sundown the night before. I stood in the hallway, hand hovering just above the dial. It was set to 64, the kind of chill that makes your joints whisper complaints before you've taken your second step. My fingers paused midair. Leave it there, Mom, Mark called from the living room. We're trying to save energy. He didn't even look up from his phone. Liana sat curled on the couch with a throw blanket tucked around her legs. She didn't say anything, just kept scrolling. One manicured thumb dancing idly across the glass. Zoe was asleep on the carpet, arms flung wide, her little chest rising and falling like soft tide water. I was just going to bump it up a notch, I said, barely louder than a sigh. Mark didn't respond. Not number, not please don't, just silence, like I hadn't spoken at all. I pulled my hand back, slowly, quietly, let the air settle back into the house the way it was, a thin, cold, and just comfortable enough for everyone but me. That afternoon, they went out for brunch, a new place downtown, trendy, with menus printed on recycled paper and syrup that cost extra. I'd asked, not directly, but in that soft way mothers do when we still want to be included without forcing a yes. "I'll just change my shoes and oh," Lyanna said, standing already halfway out the door. "It's reservation only. They're really strict about numbers. Mark made it for just the three of us. You understand?" She smiled. "Too bright. The kind that tastes like lipstick, not warmth." Zoe tugged on her mother's hand, her sparkly boots already half unzipped. Mark said something about parking, and then the door closed behind them with the quiet decisiveness of a full stop. I stood in the hallway a moment longer than necessary, one hand still resting on the banister like I needed it to balance something that wasn't physical. It wasn't new, being left behind, but this was the first time it didn't come with an excuse I could forgive. No work emergency, no stomach bug, just not included. I ate toast and a half apple for lunch, not because I was hungry, but because it gave me something to do. I chewed slowly, counted the stripes on the dish towel, watched the backyard fill with silence. They returned around 2 o'clock, arms full of leftovers in eco-friendly containers, the smell of rosemary and bacon trailing behind them like something borrowed from a better life. I heard Mark laugh in the kitchen, heard Lyanna say, "We should do that place again without the chaos of the holidays." The words weren't meant to sting, but they did. Later, as I washed a stray spoon left in the sink, Mark appeared behind me, still smelling faintly of roasted coffee and aftershave. "Hey, we're heading up to the cabin after all," he said casually, like announcing a grocery run. "Cabin?" He nodded, already checking his phone. "Echo Lake, just for a few days before the year ends. Should be good for Zoe to get some fresh air." I kept drying the spoon. "That sounds nice," I said. "Do you need help packing?" That's when he paused, just long enough, and then it came. "It's probably too cold for you, Mom. It gets slick up there. No heating in the guest rooms. Remember?" He didn't look at me when he said it. Just like that, a decision already made, not an invitation, a conclusion. I nodded. Of course I did. That was my role now, the agreeable one, the understanding one. "Of course," I said softly, folding the dish towel and setting it on the counter. "Better safe than sorry." Mark smiled, relieved, as if I'd signed a contract he didn't want to draft. He kissed my forehead a quick, distracted day and turned away. That night, I sat in my armchair by the window, the one with the sunken cushion and the throw blanket Zoe spilled juice on last spring. I watched the lights on the Christmas tree blink rhythmically. Too perfect, too planned. It used to be a real tree, the kind that shed needles and carried the scent of pine deep into your clothes. Now it was plastic, convenient, cold. They went to bed early to pack. I stayed up late with a lukewarm mug of tea and the sound of the pipes creaking under the house. Not sadness, not yet, just that quiet press of understanding. This was not about age, it was about permission, and I no longer had it. I don't remember when my voice started echoing in the house. Not loudly, not like a shout in an empty room, but in that softer way, like when you speak and no one bothers to respond. The silence answers for them. They left for the cabin on the 27th. Just after breakfast, Mark carried their bags to the SUV while Lyanna fluffed Zoe's coat and reminded her not to forget the stuffed penguin she liked to sleep with. I stood on the porch, waving as they pulled away. The scarf around my neck flapped in the wind, the one I knitted the winter Mark broke his arm sledding. He was 9. I remember because he cried more about the sled than the fracture. Back then, he used to whisper, "Don't leave me, Mom," when I turned off his light at night. Now, he says, "It's too cold for you," and books a trip with my credit card. The house felt large again the moment they were gone. Too clean, too quiet, the kind of quiet that doesn't feel earned, like something was taken, not chosen. I made the bed out of habit, though it had barely been touched. Zoe had slept in the guest room with Lyanna, who said the mattress in my room was too soft for her back. They'd left a tray in the fridge, neatly labeled, 4 foil-wrapped casseroles and a post-it note stuck to the top. "Love you, Mame currency I die Erasisadilla." I peeled it off slowly. The ink had bled a little, like it had been written in a rush, or maybe just with indifference. The first night, I chose the lasagna. It came out of the microwave uneven, steaming on one side, ice cold on the other. I didn't bother fixing it. I ate it by the window, plate on a napkin, watching the wind gather snow on the hedge. Afterward, I washed the dish, dried it, and put it back in the exact place it came from. That's what I do. I return things, even when they're given begrudgingly. The second day was worse. I spent most of it cleaning, not for cleanliness, but for motion, scrubbing grout, polishing faucets, organizing drawers filled with chargers I didn't recognize. I dusted the picture frames on the hallway shelf, pausing at one of Mark as a toddler, a cake on his chin, arms lifted toward the camera. Toward me, the photo had been shoved behind a ceramic owl and a scented candle. I brought it forward. By evening, the silence had grown weight. I tried watching television. The sound felt wrong. Too bright and fast. The news anchors smiled with too many teeth. The sitcoms laughed before the jokes were even told. So I turned it off. Instead, I folded laundry, a small load, mostly towels, and I realized something that struck deeper than any harsh word ever could. Nothing in that load belonged to me. Every towel had a monogram that wasn't mine. Every sock was too small. Every shirt smelled like Hyannis detergent. Not the lavender I used to buy in bulk when Zoe was still in bibs. Even the coffee mugs were different now, bigger, trendier. Mark once told me they got rid of the old ones because they were too fussy. I knew what that meant. I used to drink from a small porcelain mug with violets painted on the rim. It had a crack down the side I never bothered to fix. I don't know where it went, probably tossed out when the new dishwasher arrived. I sat at the table with a mug that wasn't mine and tea that tasted flat. I looked around and saw my absence everywhere, not as a void day that would mean someone noticed, but as replacement. The floral curtains I hemmed, gone, replaced with beige blinds that clicked when the wind slipped through the window panes. The tablecloth I crocheted, folded and tucked into a box in the attic, I assume replaced by a machine washable runner in slate gray. Even the small bowl I used to leave keys in had disappeared, swapped for a sleek tray with gold edges that always looked dusty. They didn't erase me in anger. They did it the way people sand down old paint, quietly, patiently, until the original color doesn't even peek through. On the third night, I opened the fridge. Still 2 casseroles left, still wrapped, still waiting. I closed the door without choosing. I wasn't hungry. Instead, I sat at the dining table. The Christmas tree blinked in the corner, too symmetrical. Not a single handmade ornament in sight, just silver balls and white lights. Mark had ordered them online. Said it was easier. Easier. Yes, that's the word. It's easier to forget the woman who showed up with cookies and cough syrup, who sewed your Halloween costumes by hand. It's easier to microwave love, wrap it in foil, and label it as care. I picked up my phone, still nothing from them, not even a check-in, not even a question of how are you doing, Mom, as if the answer were already assumed. I am doing what I've always done, waiting, folding, warming food that wasn't made with me in mind. That night, I opened my old planner, the one I stopped writing in 2 years ago when Mark started managing everything online. Inside was a page I'd torn from a magazine. I had taped it there, an article titled "The Cost of Being the Glue." It made me laugh once. Now, it felt like prophecy. I closed it and sat in the dark a while longer. I didn't cry. I rarely do. Tears, I've learned, are for when there's still something to be salvaged. I didn't sleep much that night, not for lack of trying. I went through the rituals, brushed my teeth, folded the same blanket at the foot of the bed, turned the lamp off, turned it back on, laid on my left side, then my right. The silence pressed in like snow against a window, a soft, but steady, insistent. So I got up, slipped on my slippers, walked down the hall in the dark with the familiarity of someone who's done it 1,000 times. My hands grazed the wallpaper, a faded now, but still textured with the print Mark picked out when he was 7. Little blue flowers, Mommy, he'd said. They look like stars if you squint. The memory stopped me there, halfway between the kitchen and the living room. So I sat on the floor, right there in the hallway, and I remembered. It was the winter of 1988. The blizzard had knocked the power out for nearly 3 days. Mark was 12, a gangly, all elbows and opinions, and we lived in a trailer just outside of town, the kind with aluminum walls and windows that rattled in the wind. The heat had gone out by nightfall. I lit every candle we had, lined them on the kitchen counters like sentries. We bundled under blankets in the living room. I pulled the mattress off his bed and dragged it out there. Made a nest with every quilt I could find. He didn't complain once, not when the pipes froze, not when dinner was a can of beans warmed over a single stove flame, not even when the cold made our breath visible in the air like we were ghosts talking in puffs. That night, I read to him by candlelight The Lion, the Witch and the Wardrobe. He leaned into my shoulder as I spoke, his head heavy with sleep. Every few paragraphs, I'd pause to make sure he was still awake, and he was. Every time, whispering, "Keep going, Mom, don't stop yet." When he finally drifted off, his fingers were curled around mine like a toddler's again. That was the thing about Mark. He was always softest when the world got hard. As a child, he clung to love like it was armor, and I was his first fortress. I remember waking up sometime before dawn to the sound of ice cracking outside and the ache in my back from sleeping half upright against the couch. I looked over at him, tangled in quilts, hair a mess, mouth slightly open, and I felt that fierce warmth only a mother knows, that certainty, that bone-deep conviction that nothing in this world mattered more than that boy breathing beside me. The next morning, the power came back, the heater sputtered to life, and Mark, still sleepy-eyed, looked up at me and said, "Thanks for keeping me warm, Mom." He handed me his first paycheck 6 years later, $50 in a folded envelope. I still remember the neatness of his handwriting on the front. "Because you always did more." I kept that envelope for 23 years. It's still in the drawer by my bed, yellowed now, but intact. Proof that once, I wasn't just tolerated, I was treasured. That contrast, the boy in the blizzard and the man in the parka saying, "You understand, right?" It settles in strange places. Not like a stab, more like a frost that seeps in slowly. I used to know everything about him. His favorite cereal, the way his shoulders tensed before a lie, the way he cried when he thought no one could hear. Now, I don't even know what he packed for Hawaii, or whether he left space in his suitcase for guilt. I sat on the hallway floor until the ache in my hips reminded me to move. I pushed myself up slowly, using the banister the way older bodies do, with patience, not apology. In the kitchen, I poured a glass of water. The clock blinked 3:11 a.m., a time too late for dreams and too early for routine. I stood there in the half-light, holding the glass, and whispered aloud to no one and everyone, "I didn't change. I just got older." The house didn't respond, but the echo inside me did. A boy once said thank you with a folded envelope. A man now uses my name as a passcode to vacation. I set the glass down and turned toward the window. Outside, snow blanketed the driveway like a clean slate. Not redemption, not yet, but something had begun. On the fourth day, the snow paused, not melted, just held its breath. The world outside the window looked as though it had been drawn in charcoal, soft smudges of white and gray, untouched by tire tracks or footprints. I sat at the breakfast table with the crossword puzzle open, half filled, the pencil rolling lazily between my fingers. There's a particular kind of morning quiet that makes you think something good might happen. A softness to the air, the kettle boiling just right, the way the radiator hums a steady warmth instead of clanking its usual complaints. I think that's why I answered the phone. It rang only once, a chirp, almost shy. I recognized the number. Mark's. My heart skipped, just slightly, the way it used to when he called from college. I reached for the receiver carefully, as if the movement itself might scare the moment away. "Hello?" Silence. Then Zoe's voice burst through, bright and small. "Hi, Grandma. Guess where I am?" I smiled, instantly. That's the trick with children, they reach the part of your heart that hasn't learned disappointment yet. "Where, sweetheart?" "The beach. Daddy let me wear his sunglasses and Mommy said I could have a smoothie with a flower in it." My grip on the phone tightened. "The beach. That sounds wonderful," I said, steadying my voice. "And how's the cabin?" There was a pause. I could hear the wind, but it wasn't the wind of Echo Lake. This was ocean wind, a full, rhythmic, salt-washed. Then Lyanna's voice in the background. "Zoe, sweetie, don't drop the phone in the sand, give it back to Daddy." Sand. The call ended without goodbye, just static, and the soft beep of absence. I stood there a moment longer, the receiver still to my ear, listening to a dial tone that somehow sounded personal. Then I set the phone down, not hard, not dramatic, just gently, like placing a cracked plate back on the shelf. I stared at the counter for a long time. They didn't even try to hide it. Not a single lie crafted with care. No postcard from the cabin. No fake photo of pine trees or cocoa mugs. Just a child's honesty, offered like a seashell. That was the moment I stopped expecting. But the moment before it, when I heard Zoe's voice, when I thought maybe, they'd called to check on me, to invite me, to say they missed me, that moment still hovered in the air. Hope doesn't arrive with fanfare, it drifts in quietly, over toast, through morning light, in the ring of a phone, and it leaves the same way. Later that day, I lit a candle, not for ritual, not even for prayer, just to have something warm in the room that didn't hum from a vent or buzz from a bulb. I sat in the living room with the candle flickering on the coffee table, and I let myself imagine just for a moment that it had been a mistake. That they were at Echo Lake after all, that the phone call was from a different day, that the credit card charges were coincidental, that I was still believed in. But the truth, as always, sat just beneath the surface, waiting. It waited until I opened my email, not even a deep search, just the inbox. There, between a digital coupon and a reminder from the pharmacy, sat an alert from my bank, a large transaction at a hotel in Waikiki. I stared at the screen. The amount didn't even matter. What mattered was the name, the Hyatt, the same one we'd talked about visiting back when I still took road trips. When Mark had said, maybe one day, Mom, if we ever win the lottery. Now they had gone, and they hadn't taken me, they'd taken my name. I closed the laptop carefully. No tears, just stillness. I walked to the window. The snow beginning again, soft, indifferent, unbothered by revelation. The candle burned steadily behind me, casting a quiet halo on the wall. That morning, I believed, for a breath. By dusk, I understood. Hope, I've learned, is not a liar. It just has bad timing. It's strange how silence can get louder. It started the next morning, in the smallest of ways. I went to pour myself a cup of tea, but realized the box was empty. Not because I drank it all, but because no one noticed when it ran out. Mark usually picks up groceries when they shop for the house, and sometimes Lyanna would ask, "Do you need anything, Mary?" With her half smile and her phone already in hand, and I'd always say number. Not because I didn't need anything, but because I didn't want to be a burden. Now, there was nothing to say no to, no one to ask, just the echo of that question, once polite, now missing. I boiled the kettle anyway. Old habits, they don't know when to give up. I took a slice of toast from the freezer at a good rye, the kind Mark used to love with apricot jam. We always had it during exam weeks when he was in high school. He said it made his brain feel less scrambled. I kept buying it, even when it was more expensive. I never asked him to pay me back. I dropped the slice in the toaster, sat at the table, and waited. The toaster didn't pop. It had unplugged itself again. Something about the outlet not holding. I stood, plugged it back in, and sat again. That small act felt monumental, exhausting. My knees ached from the movement, and I stayed hunched at the table for several minutes afterward. Not because I was sore though I was but because I didn't want to get back up. That's what it's like, when the well inside you runs dry. It's not a flood of despair, it's not drama, it's just a broken bar stillness. You stop moving unless absolutely necessary. I stared at the crumb on the tablecloth, a single one, round, barely visible. I didn't brush it away. There was a time when I took pride in the details, when I used to re-iron the collars on Mark's dress shirts because the store-pressed folds weren't sharp enough, when I'd wipe the fridge handles twice a day, once in the morning, once before bed, when I could hear the dishwasher finish and would get up before anyone else noticed. But now, I can't remember the last time someone said thank you. I can't remember the last time someone looked at me like I mattered and not like furniture. Useful, but expected to be silent and steady. The tea never got made. I didn't want it after all. I didn't want anything. I moved to the living room and sat on the edge of the sofa, hands resting on my thighs, spine stiff, eyes staring forward. There wasn't a single thing to do. The tree still blinked in the corner, a factory perfect. Not a single ornament hung by a child's hand, just curated, catalogued cheer. I thought of taking it down, but then what? The house would only feel emptier, so I let it blink, let it pretend. Later, I found myself in front of the bathroom mirror, toothbrush limp in my hand. I hadn't noticed how tired I looked, not just the eyes, but everything. My reflection seemed washed out, like a photograph left in the sun too long. I touched my cheek, almost curiously. It felt like someone else's skin. What happened to me? That thought didn't come with anger, just observation, like checking the weather. I remember being vibrant once, not glamorous, not flashy. Boot to broken bar visible, needed, heard. I remember laughter that didn't sound distant, music in the kitchen on Sundays, pot roast and card games, Zoe playing under the table with a toy horse and Liana asking for recipes she never wrote down. Now I'm a placeholder, a caretaker, a cautionary tale they whisper to themselves when they fear becoming irrelevant. I wandered into the spare room and found a list I'd written months ago, a grocery list folded into an old envelope. The handwriting was steady then, confident. I didn't even recognize it as mine. I used to plan things, I used to matter, but now I know better. Now, I know what it means to be quietly erased, not violently. Not cruelly, just gradually, like chalk fading from a sidewalk after too many rains. I sat on the guest bed and looked out the window. Snow fell again, soft and steady. Mark hadn't called since Zoe's slip about the beach. Liana hadn't texted. No check-in, no apology, no effort. I wasn't just forgotten. I was considered complete, used up, like a flashlight they kept in a drawer, dependable, uncomplaining, expected to work even when the batteries are nearly gone. But I felt it now, that flicker, the dimming. I sat there until dark, not sad, not even angry, just tired in a way that sleep wouldn't fix. I didn't get up the next morning right away. I sat on the edge of the bed with my feet touching the floor, slippers just a breath away but untouched. The light coming through the curtains was that washed-out winter kind, a gray, reluctant, like even the sun wasn't in the mood. My hands rested on my lap, still, slightly curled, and for the first time in days, maybe weeks, I didn't feel like moving out of obligation. I didn't feel like folding something or wiping something down or checking on anything at all. I just a broken bar sat. I stared at the dresser across from me, and the one Mark refinished in high school, sanding it too far in one corner so it always wobbled slightly. I kept it anyway, thought maybe one day Zoe would want it in her room. That was back when I still believed in heirlooms. On top of it sat a small wooden box, unassuming, dusty, locked. I hadn't opened that box in years, not because I forgot what was inside, but because I remembered too well. Documents, photocopies, letters, the original power of attorney forms Mark insisted we draft after I slipped on the stairs that winter and ended up in urgent care. Just in case, Mom, it's for your peace of mind. I hadn't minded at the time, I'd even been grateful. He filled out the paperwork with that responsible expression I used to brag about when he was 12, the boy with straight A's and a sense of duty. Back then, I believed that trust, once given, was sacred. Now I knew better. I stared at the box and something inside me shifted. Not a jolt, not a rage, just a soft turning of gears long left idle. Something must change. It wasn't even about Hawaii, not entirely. It wasn't the betrayal of the beach, the fruity drinks, or the hidden receipts. It wasn't the money, though I'd be lying if I said that didn't cut deep. No. It was the permission they'd granted themselves, to exclude me, to use me, to forget me. I realized in that moment that I'd stopped asking for kindness long ago, and worse, I'd stopped expecting it. That was the betrayal, not theirs, mine. Somewhere between casseroles and key copies, I'd surrendered the belief that I deserved to be considered, not just helped when it was convenient, not just thanked with emojis and duty-bound gifts, but seen, heard, respected. I didn't stand up right away, the thought was still too soft, but I reached for the box, ran my hand across the lid. The key was tucked in a ceramic dish in my bedside drawer, a dish Mark made in second grade, lopsided and painted in streaks of orange and brown. I held the key between my fingers for a long time before putting it back. Not yet, but soon. Later that afternoon, I made myself a fresh pot of tea, a real tea. I walked down to the corner store and bought it myself. The cashier asked if I wanted a bag and I said number. I carried the box in both hands, warm against the cold. Back home, I steeped the leaves slowly, let them swirl, watched them settle, and I sat at the kitchen table with the cup held between both palms. For the first time in a long while, the silence didn't feel like a punishment. It felt like room. Room to think, room to breathe, room to remember that I had a name before it was just Mom, before Grandma, before the invisible title of obligation. I was Mary Hartwood. I taught school for 37 years. I held my husband's hand through chemo. I paid off a mortgage by myself and learned how to snake a drain because no one else would. I packed lunches with notes inside. I remembered birthdays when no one remembered mine. I'm not a relic, not a room to be left behind. I'm not a season they've outgrown. I'm a woman who has been generous, and quiet, and patient, but not foolish. I looked down at my cup, the steam rising like breath. Something must change. Not for revenge, but for repair. Because if I don't reclaim what's my name, my dignity, my voice, my place, they'll go on thinking I was never there at all. And that a broken bar, that would be the real erasure. The next morning, I woke before the sun, not from a restless night, but from something else. A steadiness, a center I hadn't felt in a long time, the kind of calm that doesn't wait for permission. I dressed with care, not for anyone else, not to look presentable, but because I wanted to feel like myself again. I chose the wool skirt with the soft lining that never rides up, and the rose-colored sweater I hadn't worn in years. The one Walter once said brought out the blush in my cheeks. At the last moment, I added the pearl earrings, the ones I used to save for church or birthdays. I fastened them with hands that still shook slightly, but not from doubt. The air was sharp outside, crisp enough to remind me I was alive. I walked slowly, my coat pulled close, down the sidewalk toward town. The streets were still quiet, holiday quiet, a few porch lights flickering, a dog barking in the distance. I passed the corner bakery where Zoe and I used to buy ginger cookies on cold Saturdays. It hadn't opened yet, but the bank had. Rick, the manager, looked up when I entered. His expression shifted when he saw me, not surprised, but something else. A softness behind the professionalism. "Mrs. Hartwood," he said, setting down his pen. "How can I help you today?" I didn't sit right away. I pulled the envelope from my purse and laid it gently on the desk between us. Inside are the documents, the ones I'd signed years ago, when I still believed that love and trust meant the same thing. "I'd like to update my accounts," I said quietly. He didn't ask why, he just nodded. "We'll get your name back where it belongs, Mrs. Hartwood." There was no dramatics to it, no accusations, just forms, ink, signatures, quiet transfer of ownership, from assumption back to autonomy. When I left the bank, the air felt different, not warmer, just clearer. I stopped at the diner across from the hardware store, ordered breakfast, pancakes, extra crispy bacon, and a single cup of black coffee. The waitress asked if I wanted whipped cream. I said yes. I ate slowly, letting the syrup pool just so, the butter melt into the edges. No one interrupted, no one asked for anything. I wasn't waiting on someone else's timeline. I wasn't checking my phone for a reply that wouldn't come. I was simply a broken bar present. After breakfast, I walked to the small boutique 3 blocks down, the one with the wide windows and soft jazz playing on loop. I hadn't been inside in years, thought it was too expensive, too frivolous, meant for other women. Today, I went in. The clerk smiled, polite and distant. She offered help and I declined, kindly, but firmly. I knew what I wanted, a new coat, not just for the cold, but for the feeling. I tried 3, settled on one, a deep navy wool with silver buttons and a lining like silk. It fit, not perfectly, but truthfully. At the register, I paid in full, not on Mark's card, not with emergency funds, with mine, money I'd saved from decades of stretching grocery lists and skipping new shoes so someone else could have what they needed. I carried the coat home in both arms, the bag crisp and crinkling with every step. At home, I slipped it on, stood before the mirror, looked at myself, really looked. I didn't look younger. I looked like someone who had endured a day and was done enduring in silence. That afternoon, I didn't clean. I didn't prep a meal. I didn't fold a thing. Instead, I opened the hallway closet, and I pulled down the box of ornaments. Not the new ones, not the white bulbs and silver garlands Lyanna ordered last year. Mine. The handmade ones. The paper stars. The beaded candy canes. The lopsided angel Mark made when he was 5. I decorated the tree, not for the holiday, not for their return, for myself. By evening, the living room looked different, not curated, lived in. I poured a glass of wine, sat in my chair, watched the lights blink not in uniforme but in memory and heart. No one needed to see it but me, and that was enough. They returned on a Sunday. I heard the tires crunch in the driveway just after 2, the SUV door slammed, then another, then laughter high, easy. Sun warmed. Zoe was the first to the porch. She rang the doorbell twice, as if I might not hear it, as if this were still a house she expected to walk into without pause. I didn't open the door, not yet. Instead, I stood at the window and watched. Mark was unloading bags, a colorful, patterned luggage that didn't match the stories they'd told. One of them had a sticker from Honolulu on the side. Lyanna wore oversized sunglasses. Even though the sky was overcast, she glanced at the door, then pulled out her phone. I let them knock again. Then I opened the door, just a crack, enough to be seen, not enough to be entered. Zoe squealed, arms outstretched. "Grandma, I missed you." My heart tugged as it always does for her, but I didn't step forward. Mark smiled, uncertain. "Hey, Mom, we're back. How was everything?" I nodded once. "Quiet." He looked past me, his eyes flicking toward the living room. "Can we come in? It's freezing out here." "Just one moment," I said gently, closing the door with soft finality. I walked to the kitchen, picked up the envelope I'd placed there 3 days ago. Not thick, not legal-sized, just 1 page, folded neatly, precise. I returned to the door, opened it fully now. Mark looked confused. Lyanna's smile had faded into that tight-lipped expression she wore when something didn't go her way. I handed him the envelope. "What's this?" "A copy of the changes to my accounts," I said quietly. "You're no longer listed." He blinked. "Mama." I shook my head, gently. "No, Mark, this isn't a discussion." He opened the envelope, skimmed the first few lines. "You froze the credit line, without talking to me?" That word, talking to me, as if I owed him consultation, as if trust hadn't already been broken with fruity drinks and a hotel suite in Waikiki. "I've spoken enough," I said. I stepped outside onto the porch, pulled the door shut behind me. The cold bit at my neck, but I welcomed it. Zoe clutched a shell necklace in her hands. "I brought you something," she said, holding it up. I took it, fingers brushing hers. "Thank you, sweetheart." I smiled, then knelt down to her level. "Next time, bring a story, one you don't have to keep secret." She tilted her head, confused, but her eyes softened. She nodded. Lyanna started to speak, but I turned before she could. Back inside the house, I walked to the fireplace, hung the shell necklace gently over a small hook by the mantel. Then I walked to the hallway, to the wall where the family portrait used to hang. A nail remains, nothing more. I didn't put the picture back. Instead, I left the space bare, a quiet kind of truth, not revenge, not drama, just absence, mine. Later that evening, I sat by the window with a blanket and a cup of tea. The Christmas lights blinked gently, soft and uneven, just the way I liked them. They didn't come back that day. They went home, back to their house, my house once, where my linen still lived in closets and my photo still sat on a shelf that hadn't been dusted since. I didn't call them. I didn't write. I had already spoken. I had acted. This was my goodbye, not in words, but in withdrawal. Not with fire, but with a door that no longer waited to be opened. The house is still, but not the kind of stillness that takes. It's different now. There's space, not just physical, but emotional. A quiet I chose, not one I was left with, and that has made all the difference. It's been 5 days since they came back. They haven't called. I haven't waited, not in bitterness, not in silence designed to punish. I simply a broken bar don't need to be needed anymore. Not by people who confuse obligation with love. Not by a son who believes warmth is something to ration, doled out between spa appointments and polite deceit. I've begun tidying the house, not to serve others, but to make it mine again, one drawer at a time, one photo at a time. The old ornaments are still on the tree, twinkling in soft rebellion. The lopsided angel leans slightly to the left. I let her. We've both earned the right to be imperfect in our own home. Yesterday, I bought flowers, yellow tulips, just beginning to open. I arranged them myself, not like a florist, but like a woman who knows what beauty feels like when it's honest. I placed them on the table by the window, right next to the envelope Mark once gave me $50 from his first paycheck. I found it again while cleaning out the drawer beside my bed. I unfolded it, smoothed the creases, read the handwriting one more time. Because you always did more. I didn't cry, I just smiled, gently, sadly. He was a boy when he wrote that. The man who went to Hawaii on my name is someone else, and I've stopped confusing the two. I've begun writing again, just little notes, sentences, a list of things I want to do, and not for legacy, not for family, but for myself. Take the train to the botanical gardens. Try the cafe copyright with the lemon scones. Buy new sheets, soft ones, just because. There's power in small intentions. There's strength in saying, I matter, even alone. Rick called to confirm the final paperwork this morning. His voice was kind, professional. Everything is finalized. You're secure, Mrs. Hartwood. Secure. That word used to feel like something someone else gave me. Now, it feels like something I built. Slowly, patiently, without applause. I walked the block this afternoon at a long loop past the library and back again. The snow had melted in patches, revealing tufts of stubborn grass and half-buried acorns. The air was cold. My breath curled in front of me, but my step was steady. As I walked, I passed a young couple pulling a sled with a child tucked in blankets. The little girl waved at me. I waved back. They smiled. I smiled. We kept walking. No obligation, just shared space, human and whole. Back home, I brewed a fresh cup of tea, sat in my chair, let the late sun stretch across the floorboards. I looked around, at the shell necklace Zoe gave me, still hanging by the mantel, at the wall where the family portrait once hung, still empty, intentionally, at the life I had reclaimed, and I said aloud, not for them, but for me. No, I'm not okay. I let that truth hang in the room a moment. Then I added, more softly, but I'm fixing it. And in that quiet, with no applause and no audience, I felt the stillness settle, not as loneliness, but as peace. The kind you don't beg for, the kind you earn.